Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started, everybody. We have some people joining us by WebEx as well. My name is Nathan Carlin. I'm the director of the McGovern Center for Humanities and Ethics. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us in person and online. I'd like to thank Anson Koshi for organizing the Arts and Resilience series for us. I'd also like to thank the McGovern Foundation for their generous support of the McGovern Center for many, many years, the Dean's Office, and all of my colleagues at the McGovern Center. Today, we're very happy and honored to have Dr. Samuel Shem with us. He is currently a professor at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. He's the author of many, many novels. You all know him, of course, for The House of God. His novels have sold well over 3 million copies. He has degrees from Harvard and Oxford. He's an MD, PhD. He was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. I asked Shem one time, what accomplishment is he most proud of in life? And he said he was most proud of a play that he wrote, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, which was on Broadway for a good amount of time. Especially pleased to say that Shem and I have become very good friends over the last couple of years, talking on the phone about once a month. So the pandemic, for all of the sort of problems that it has caused for all of us, has opened up new opportunities for friendship and connection as well. This is not Shem's first time to McGovern Medical School. He was here in 1994 when Dean Ribble invited him to give the commencement address at our school. So I'd like to welcome Shem back. He's going to be doing a reading from his new novel, which will be coming out in about 2 or 3 months from now, called Our Hospital, about the pandemic. Let's welcome Samuel Shem.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm starting a little love affair with you because it's really amazing that he's really been the first person to, sort of in a backward way at first, but now he's jumped in to look at what I write. I mean, I'm mainly known for, excuse me, The House of God, but I've been doing this for 40 years. And about 40 years or something, 50 maybe. I write, that's what I do, and the most popular book, The House of God, is not really the best book. It's best in certain ways, but I never knew anything about writing about it. I didn't want to write a novel. I wanted, as you heard, I was a playwright. The play, actually, I have to mention, is called It's Bill W. and Dr. Bob, about the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous, which has gone all over. So this is going to be very simple. I am, for the first time, reading this aloud to an audience. So it's already been accepted, so you can say whatever you want. I ain't changing nothing. It's hard to know as a novelist when you write the novel. And I started this in the first part of the COVID, because I was on the road in New York at that time, March 2020, when I was going out there for Man's Fourth Best Hospital, and I found myself at Montefiore, New York, rough place, and there I was with this huge crowd. And night before, we went to a big dinner, and the only thing we didn't do, you couldn't shake hands. I don't know if people remember, we had to do this with our elbows, And anyway, I did another couple of things at big hospitals, and I came home, and lo and behold, that one of the earliest COVIDs in the United States. And then, of course, I gave it to Janet right away, and it was not good. I mean, we got to the point with nothing. You could do nothing. There were no tests. There's nothing. But we sort of, I sort of felt that it was sort of edging, the virus is coming in and looking from time to time, looking down into the lungs. And should I go in there or not? And it didn't. So, but the result of that was bad and good in the same way. It took a while to get ready to get better. But the good part was that, when we got, it took, months to get better. But when we actually got better, I decided I had to, hey, wait a second moments. That's what gets me on. Hey, wait a second moments. The backdrop of this is the first 3 waves of COVID. I have to do that. Somebody has to do it. So that's what it's about. Now that's good. And I started, reading everything, keeping notes, etc. 3 years later, it's a book. But I, as a writer, I found that I only can write in the morning. I sort of set a limit because I could go crazy if I did. And people, when they interview me, sometimes say, "Well, what time do you stop in the morning?" I say, well, I stop when the what is it? Propranolol cuts in. Yeah, I mean it. I have to take a So the good news was that it went pretty fast in the morning, but then I did something I've never done, which is I, mess around it and then go back to and write another 2 or 3 hours in the evening. And that really wore me out. I shouldn't have done that, but there wasn't anything else to do. I mean, I'm still sort of recovering from such a hard job so fast. So enough of this. I'm just going to read a bunch. I thought I'd show you. Did you see this? This is the book, double side, and I will. So and it's ridiculous to have. I know this and like this so much that there's a hell of a lot of things I'm gonna try to do, but I will never have time. But I'm just gonna go through some things. People, okay. Like all my novels, this is a epigraph. Quote, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a house of thieves." Right? Matthew 21:13. That's where we are, kids. That's where we are. Money and the hospitals. The other thing is, when this comes out, it will be the 4th in this series. It's the House of God, No Misery, which is about my psych training, men's 4th Best Hospital, and then this one. And this one is called Our Hospital. And it's, I think that's all that there's going to be. But when this gets published, believe it or not, this is these 4 books are 50 years apart. And so it's, if you wanted to really know what was happening in American medicine, you could do maybe not so much better if you just read this. Okay, let's see. I'm just gonna read. Late March 2020, Dr. Roy G. Bash, he's the hero, as you know from the House. Dr. Roy G. Bash was dead tired. It was past midnight, and he had been driving north for over an hour on the New York State Thruway from Montefiore Hospital in the deep Bronx to his new house in Columbia, New York. The house where he had been born and raised 128 miles north of Manhattan. The house was a grand 1854 classic sitting high up on Mount Merino overlooking the Hudson and the Catskill Mountains. Columbia, to its inhabitants, was known as a town of breakage. If something could break, especially something to do with town government or weather forecasts, it would. But Roy had been assured that the house was now breakage-free. He and his wife, Barry, had been living in Costa Rica on a mountain above Carmona, Nandayure. A paradise, yes, but with the coronavirus rampant in America, they decided to move closer to their daughter, Spring, who was working and living with a long-term boyfriend in New York City. When he was asked to help out at the hospital in Columbia, they had taken a trip back home and falling in love with the town, they found and bought their dream house. And then he's thinking, going home for good in all ways. 2 more hours to go. He was drinking coffee, but strangely, the caffeine didn't seem to be working. The initial jolt had been fine, then vanished. His eyelids were getting heavy and scratchy, and he couldn't stop yawning. Weird. He cracked down the windows and let in the cold air to help him stay awake. It had been a long day. He'd gotten up early at their daughter's condo in the now chic upper West Side in the city, not far from the George Washington Bridge, which his immigrant grandfather, Samuel Fuchs, a metal worker, had toiled. A rare photo showed Sam hundreds of feet above the Hudson with an acetylene torch and no safety harness. In his spare time, he'd made out of copper elegant Sumerian wine vases, all curves and shine, copied from the Museum of Natural History. Tough, that generation, I was thinking. That afternoon at Montefiore, Roy had given a surgical grand round to talk to packed houses of 300 doctors, nurses, and others on staying human in medicine, the danger of isolation, and the healing power of good connection. At dinner that night, the New York Sailing Club, he'd drunk too much wine with 8 of the top Montefiore surgeons. Awareness had recently heightened of this novel coronavirus out of China that was spreading rapidly. The main precaution recommended by the CDC was not to shake hands, but to bump elbows. A few days before Montefiore gig, he'd also done one at Downstate Medical School in Brooklyn. He was in demand as a speaker because he had become a celebrity, the real live doctor who was the model for the hero of the classic internship novel, The House of God, and its sequels, Mount Misery and Man's Fourth Best Hospital. Now he was exhausted, hence his torpor behind the wheel. Finally, with relief, he turned off the throughway at the Catskill exit. He passed the Catskill Country Club. In his boyhood, the private golf course near his home in Columbia did not admit Jews. But Catskill Country Club, a public course a half an hour across the river, did. Finally, there it was, the Rip Van Winkle Bridge across the Hudson River. And then in his head, God, I loved my summer job as a toll collector on the bridge during high school in Harvard, with my snappy uniform and gun in the drawer that had never been fired since it was put there in 1939. Looking up at Alona, the grand palace on top of a hill beat by the painter Frederick Church, he turned left along Mount Merino and then right into the long driveway of the new house. He got out of the house, dragged himself into the house. The sharp, tart scent of fresh paint was a joy, snapping him awake for a moment. The renovation was finally complete. He called Barry, still at Spring's apartment in New York. I'm home, hon, he said. Thank God. Long day. Love you. Good night. Love you too. Sleep tight. It was almost 2 a.m., but he was now so tired he felt jazzed. He dragged himself up to the 1875 grand staircase, the creaking a comfort. He poured himself a shot of George Dickel sipping whiskey and lay back down almost horizontal on the new leather-scented couch and watched the news, all bad. After a few minutes, he clicked it off and sat up. He was so tired he slouched back in the couch. And then he tried again to get on his feet. This is once again in his mind. On your feet, yea, and a sudden blow, a sense draining to steady falling forward, fell face down on floor. We went bang. Barry called his cell phone at 6 a.m, no answer. She left a message. At 7, nothing. Another message. She steeled herself and called Dr. Amy Rose, the intensivist in charge of the Cush Care Hospital emergency room and ICU, and left a message to call. Nothing. Panicking, she called Amy's uncle Orville Rose, their dear friend and forever happened. Yeah. Forever doctor for the town, who knew everything. Almost 75, Orville was owned enough to be up early. He picked up on the second ring. I'm frantic, she said to Orville, telling him the details. Somebody's got to go over there. There's a spare key under the back door mat. I'm on my way, said Orville. Those of you who've read The Spirit of the Place, he's the doctor in town, right? How many people have read The Spirit of the Place at this point? Okay, anyway, so you're getting some, yeah. Somebody's got to go over there. There's a spare key under the back door mat. I'm on my way, said Orville. At Roy's house, Orville put on a mask and gloves and went in, shouting for Roy. No answer, worrisome. He walked through the rooms and finally found Roy sprawled down on the oak floor in a significant puddle of blood. Orville tried to turn him over. Whoa, dead or unconscious bodies are heavy. He tried again, but no way. Roy ground, awoke. He needed help to roll over, dazed and bloody. Orville did a quick assessment. The blood from a gash in his forehead and temple clotted, hours old. A fall on his face. There had been no time to prevent a direct face-down hit. Could be heart arrhythmia. Transient, now in normal sinus, breathing okay. No signs of stroke, feels feverish. Been drinking, George Dickel, kind of obese, disoriented, mumbling, probably drunk. Please don't let it be a stroke. Orville called Lebowski Ambulance and Taxidermy to take Roy to the hospital, then called Barry. Clearly he fell on his face. But why? He never had fallen that way, never. Why? Don't know, but we'll find out. Roy was now fully awake in normal sinus rhythm, angry that he was being taken to the hospital. Orville knew well the Jewish community in Columbia was small and tight, and he'd helped Roy into medicine, as he did a generation later with his niece, Amy. At the start of COVID, when the emergency doctors at Cush Care realized how dangerous it was to stay and take care of patients at Cush Care, many of them quit. Those who remained now were really stressed. Orville knew Roy was back in New York and had asked if he would help, and if he knew any doctor friends who might come to help as well. Roy said he would be glad to, and he's brought to 2 other former interns of the House of God, Eat My Dust Eddie and Hyper Hooper. Remember them? And Hyper Hooper. Both were recently retired in California and bored. They jumped at the chance to work with Roy again and had already arrived at Cush Care. Roy was supposed to join them after the event in Montefiore. So I passed out, exhaustion, Roy said, lying on a stretcher in emergency. Big deal. As I told you in detail, it was a long day and I was dead tired. For some reason, I blacked out and fell. What was the last thing you recall? Amy asked. She was in full anti-COVID garb, covering every part of her body. Finishing my drink, just one, maybe 1 or 2 of bourbon. So I fell down, so what? So clearly you didn't try to break your fall, said Amy. That's not normal. Your heart might have stopped, couldn't pump the blood up to your head. She looked at the cardiac monitor. EKG just now is showing runs of atrial fibrillation. She pointed the temp gun at his forehead. 101 fever, blood pressure low. So he said, if you do an EKG, everybody my age has something, often runs of atrial fib. I am your doctor now, Roy, me and Orby, said Amy. As you know, if a doctor tries to treat himself, he has a fool for a patient. Okay? He nodded. I have to work you up completely, starting with chest films. For what? COVID. Roy looked startled. There's no sign of it, no breathing problems. It's becoming clear that all kinds of symptoms could be COVID. She saw his face go white. Roy, honey, we're just finding out how easy it is to catch this and spending all that time with without a face mask in big crowds, right? He nodded. The only restriction the hospital's made is no shaking hands. So you were exposed for hours, he sighed. Why do you think I fainted? Either the atrial fib or most likely orthostatic hypertension, fainting. You fell without putting your hands down to break the fall. It's one of the first protection reflexes a baby has. If they sense they're about to be dropped, out go the arms to protect themselves. What's it called? The Moro reflex? If you didn't extend your arms, that means you were out before you hit the floor. Our COVID expert here, Dr. Dandona, has had 2 other patients with your symptoms. He thinks that COVID can damage peripheral small blood vessels, and so the blood pools in the legs. And with your heart straining, the blood didn't get to the brain. A cold, damp shiver went through Roy. Oh, God. There's no test for the virus yet, she said, but clinically, I think you've got it. You're in good shape, but frankly, your weight is a thick risk factor. I just read a paper showing that COVID thrives on fat. The fever might vanish in a few days, but it's all new territory in medicine. With this virus, it's all new territory in medicine, this virus. Nobody knows Bupkis. We're flying blind. I'm going to have to admit you to watch you carefully. Roy let this sink in. His face still blanched. One more thing. Sure, on what? I'm scared of being in the hospital for any length of time. They're dangerous, especially in spreading pathogens. And from what I've heard about the Cush management, death. So I arrange it to stay at home, at least until we see if it's going to get worse or not. Roy, she said, shaking her head. There are things we can only work up with you right here under observation. With this virus, things can change in a split second. This hospital, especially with the new team, me and the great nurses and Hooper and Eddie, is really the safest place around. Okay, but let's make it as quick as possible. I want to get back. I want to get to work with my guys here. I got them here and I don't want to let them down. So that's the first chapter. Okay, got it? I mean, I can talk a little bit about how you do it. People are interested in writing too, right? Well, shall I talk a little bit about how you do it?
Yeah, why don't you say a little bit about writing in general, and then any reactions or questions from the group?
Yeah. First chapters are very, very important, of course. And they're difficult. Especially if they're based on something that you have a debt to doctors to do it right. And everything medically there is right. And I didn't know that's what happened to me. So that's exactly what happened to me. And well, that's the way I later discovered it. They didn't know that was a symptom at that time, but I put it in there, but nobody knew, and it's just boom, like that. That's what I did too. and it's the little capillaries or veins that don't, get to that. Anyway. So what if you're writing that story, what are the things that needed to be in there? What did I define there for you? I mean, what do you get a good feel for at this point?
I mean, just thinking about back 3 years ago, almost exactly, it's like we really didn't know what was going on. We would hear about COVID in the news. We would start seeing, warnings in hospital emails and all of that. So to just kind of like have that reminder right here, and you just put things back into that place 3 years ago of really not knowing. It's just like at the same time, it's like a helpful reminder of just like, oh yeah, like we really didn't know what we were doing back then. We unfortunately, started to get some experience as patients came in, but then, it sounds like you can kind of also kind of hear like the foreshadowing of like, all right, there's a way, haven't quite hit that yet, where it's only, 2 patients and that they're, you were able to go to the hospital, but we kind of like, even though we know what's going to happen, at the same time, it's kind of like putting us back into that place where it's like, okay, we don't know it's COVID yet, but like we can kind of start thinking that, we need to keep an open differential of like what this could be. So I think a lot of readers will connect with that and just get that helpful reminder like, oh wait, yeah, this is where we were 3 years ago.
Right. So place is really important in anything you write. So there's place. You sort of know what this place is there. I don't remember if I in this way it's a private equity. Is the word private equity in that? I can't remember. I think maybe not. But anyway, that's the kind of hospital that bought this, which is a big deal. Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment about it? The other thing is it's very good if you get some of the main characters in right away, because that's telling the reader you got to pay attention. You can't be frivolous. I mean, this is who we want to be following. Okay. Let's see. It's hard. It's very hard to write a first chapter for a book. You think you'll never get through it, and it requires. That probably took 5 revisions, depending on what I wrote after, where you can sort of, and it sort of seems like it flows. I think you're not led one way and then find it like the other.
If we take some questions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So questions from the group. I know a number of you have read Shem in class with me and so forth. One question, I'll start off with the first question, and then you all have some time to think about your own. How do you feel like you have personally grown by being a writer for 50 years? How have you changed?
My memory. Well, I've changed in having, the fear is still there that I'm never going to write this book. Are you kidding me? This age, but writing fiction is learning how you write fiction. It's like how you ride a bike, how you get through medical school. It seems like it seems like knowing who and how you are as what you've written before carries you, because it's very scary. It's very, it takes a while until you inherit the people, and then how do you get to put them down? And it's not notice. It's not about a person. It's about relation. It's about connection with other people. Who are these? If you charted this, you've got a lot of people doing a lot of things, and you now know who you should hear when the next thing comes. You know, this is putting the thing ground, the spike in the ground.
Thank you for the reading. That was amazing. If you still do clinical work, how has it affected your relationship with your patients as a psychiatrist, like being a well-known author at the same time?
I gave that up probably 40 years ago.
Okay.
But it actually, it's a very important thing to look at, because as a doctor, how the hell are you going to write if you want to write? You know, I mean, one of the things that I knew before I got into med school is I wanted to be a writer, and I was looking for what I could do to give me time to write. And hey, it's like I didn't know what to give, but then I took psychiatry rotations, and hey, you learn about people, you can go in the afternoon. And you hear all kinds of character stuff. So it's not a bad thing. It's hard to do, to switch from writing fiction and then going. I almost never went in the morning, which created havoc with my residency. Well, where's Bergman? He didn't come in again. You know, it's like, so you have to, if you really, I mean, the other thing is, you got to like it. You know, there are a lot of people, I know a lot of writers, or knew a lot of writers who really hated writing, you know, and they just do it for whatever reasons, but they hate it. And I just, this is, you know, I may have gone too far, you know, being Roy Bash and all of that stuff. The other thing about this particular book is I'm bringing people that I've written about before in other books, like the spirit of the place is coming in, and then all of the three books about House of God. And so that's a couple of them are in, actually most of them are in there by then. Yeah.
In your early days, who did you ask to give feedback on your writing? Who do you ask these days?
In my early days, well, as you heard, I wrote plays before. I wasn't really interested in novels. I wrote plays, and that's interactive. And you know, you write, and you have readings, and that's very different than a novel. It's all inside of a novel. I didn't want to write a book really about this, but as I said, and you may have heard me say this before. When I went into my psychiatry internship, 3 or 4 of the guys, Hyper Hooper, Eddie, they were all in Boston still doing their next step, and Chuck, and they came along, and we drank and we smoked and we just got drunk, and after a while we laughed so hard at what the hell we were going through, that I started writing it down on a piece of paper. I was not writing. I'd never written a novel before. And then by a slip of things and miscommunication, somebody looked at it, and then they said they wanted to, what else have you got? Do more. And then I did get a contract to do House of God, but it was all cathartic. It was, and I have the tapes. They're so funny because we were just so down. Yeah.
I'm going to repeat the questions so the online people can hear them. And if you're online, you have questions, you can write them in the chat as well. Tisha?
So I have a question for you about advice. So a few students in here took my Damon Tweedy Black Man in White Coat course, And one thing I told them was, you may not see yourself as a writer now, but in 10 years, you might decide to write a book. And so to keep track of interesting things, keep track of how you feel about your training, how you feel, the emotions, the thoughts, that kind of thing, that these notes might prove handy later on when you want to go back and write about medical school and that kind of thing. So I wonder, when you were writing, was it all reflection? Did you do that? Or what other advice would you have for students at this point in time who say, I don't see myself being a physician writer, but we all know that lots of cool things happen to you and you very well could. And a lot of you have very, very good writing skills. And even if you don't, it can be developed, right? So do you have any advice for our medical students who at this point may not see themselves as writers one day, but might?
Yeah, well, I spent decades on might. No, it's just, the thing is, it's very hard to go all the way to published novels. It really is. But it can be real joy and real satisfaction in our jobs to write about it, just to keep it. Oh my God, what did I see? How did I feel about this and that? And just do it for yourself, because it's like doing it to a friend. And then if your friend gets sort of another one wants to try to be a novel, that's fine. You know, it's inherently, I mean, every day, if we're on the wards, we have a short story at least, or three. You have a novel if you're having it for, a patient. So, but there's only one reason to really do it. There's only one reason, and that is if you like it. Because, I mean, there's so many writers that really torture themselves. And I've had bad times with difficult books and stuff like that. And I've let go of I have like 3 novels, never, gone through. But I wanted to do it, and I know, well, maybe this might come in you have to do it. Don't do it for money. That's crap. You're lucky if you make money, but do it for your loved ones. Read a little bit to it, to him or her. It's reverberations and of what have been very valuable to you. So do it. But do it. I mean, I have so many of them. I have piles, but I'll never see it again. And the thing is, when you capsulize your vision to write, that whatever you feel really strong about could be the topic and the time frame, but also would be something that you really are having fun with. I know so many people who hate writing, who are writers. That's not a life. The other piece is it's really scary to get into a real heavy writing life. I think especially fiction, because there are no rules in fiction and you can go anywhere with it. I think that working so hard in these last 3 years, and I'm to make this okay to go with the others, and the incredible thing, people have written about plagues forever. I had to do it. I had to do it, and but the main thing I would say to anybody who does it or tries to save things that are good and write little things, only do it if you like it. You've got a hard thing to do already, baby. Seriously,
We had another question, yeah.
So like once we have the short stories kind of like fleshed out, do you have any recommendations or any guidance to how we can start, I guess, or get the ball rolling with the publication process?
The question is advice on how to get the ball rolling on the publication process.
Well, I mean, it's easy. I mean, the thing you have to do, well, I think an intermediate stop is probably to show it to people that won't kill you. write nasty things about you, and just, and, if they say it's Tolstoy, then rip it up, I think it's very important, but there are ways, you have to get an agent. And actually, there are people, I use one of them, a wonderful woman who I pay as a critic, when I have a certain point, and I've done that for 20 years, and she's very helpful. She couldn't stand the job of being in the New York rush, so she's wonderful. Yeah, that's the easy part. All right, can I go on and read a little something else?
Sure, yeah.
All right. We'll get. I haven't lost the audience yet, Let's see. Okay. Let me just see for a minute. Okay, this is about this is Eat My Dust Eddie, if you remember from the House of God. It's about even with the arrival of sharp-humored Eat My Dust Eddie, who actually wanted the night shift, Amy shifted not often and promptly at 6. He was responsible. Sure enough, at half 6, there was a run of really sick patients. She texted orderly, "Go ahead with dinner without her." In the maelstrom of disease this evening, one patient stood out. Bob Bate, Jr. At 21 and 5'6", Bob was close to 300 pounds. Many of our Colombians are overweight, tanked up with cholesterol and lipids. Obesity didn't run in Junior's family, it raced. His father, Bobby Bates Sr. of Bakery, Bait and Tackle, had died a year ago of fat. Hell for doctors to treat the damage it wreaks on every system of the body. No match for insulin. Junior had taken over the store, selling bait while consuming whole baking sheets of buttery pastries. He presented with cough, fever, and atrial fibrillation, and a chest X-ray showed COVID. Yet in the waiting room, he refused to obey the mask rule, screaming it was tyranny. A rule is a rule. Butchie Lee Hines, security, wheeled him out into the parking lot and left him. Eat My Dust Eddie could care less that somebody like Bobby had left the hospital, but legally he needed to get him to sign an AMA, against medical advice discharge form. Eddie, as the witness, and Butchie for protection, went out to the parking lot. You got COVID? You got COVID, Eddie said. You want to die? Fine with me. Sign here. COVID is fake news. You doctors are just doing it for the money. Sign here. Bobby paused. What else could it be? Nothing else, not fake. Here, sign. I'd rather die. Now you kid, said Eat My Dust. Now you are talking. He turned to Butchie Lee. Do what you want with him, Butchie. He's history. He snapped up the form and turned away. Hey, wait, is it a painful death? Nothing much, Eddie said over his shoulder. Just slow suffocation, drowning in your own blood. Wait, wheel me back in. With the help of 2 burly orderlies and 1 kind weightlifting housekeeper, Amy and Eddie managed to get him onto the examining table and started to put in big fat IV lines. Suddenly, Junior's oxygen plummeted. Cardiac retch. The team converged, lasered in on saving him. Just listen, this is how you have to use your experience in medicine as this. It has to be, it's right, but that's not in the forefront. The characters are in the forefront in the situation, okay? In the midst of and it's good if you can make it funny. I said when I said, how am I going to make it this funny? COVID funny? Come on. In the midst of the resuscitation, Amy noticed standing on the other side of the glass, a tall, wispy young man with a narrow face and oiled black hair, wearing a dark, well-tailored business suit with a narrow red tie and a KK, that's for Kush Care, logo mask. On his chest was a sparkly badge. He beckoned Amy to come out. Amy waved him away and went back to saving Junior. It was frustrating. With drugs and shocks, they got him out of atrial fib, but then he clicked back into fatal ventricular tachycardia. They'd shock him again. He'd go back into normal sinus for a few minutes and then back to that VTAC again and over again. The team was losing him. Amy went another step, slipping a pacemaker into the heart, which worked briefly, then atrial fib and VTAC for fail. They had tried everything. Nothing had worked. Amy called off the recitation. A kid dying is always hard. Now, the other thing about writing is anything that you want read, you have to hit the feelings. It's not up here, right? So this is when, writing, you can't plan it, but this is where, when it comes to, it was frustrating with drugs and shocks. They got him out of atrial fib, and then he clicked back into fatal ventricular tachycardia. They shock him again, normal sinus for a few minutes, then the VTAC over and over. Amy called off the resuscitation. A kid dying is always hard. Many of them, the docs and nurses and orderlies, had kids that age, and many more were patrons of the store, hooked on the bakery and fresh bait Thursday specials. Leatrice offered a whispered, "Our Father." For a long moment, the team stood there in silence, staring at the mess on the floor. Bloody syringes, vials, tubes, and IVs. The floor crisscrossed with bloody footprints, and in a corner, bright purple jumpsuit they'd cut off Junior, and his forlorn red baseball cap. Depressed and extorted, they started to file out. Immediately, two men from Kush Care Cleaning started mopping up the blood and trash. Still waiting was the willowy young KK man who Amy had never seen before. Hi, he said with a cheery toothpaste ad smile, as if the carnage he had just watched happen had not happened in reality, but in a top-rated new doctor drama, say, Hospital Hunks in Hell. Pointing to his own badge, he said, "Kenneth S. Miller Jr., Director, Care for Safety. I have to inform you that there are like 2 dangerous safety violations. Luckily, they are easy fixes." Imagine you're seeing this apparition, right? Luckily, they are easy fixes. Amy and the team faced him in the tight silence, their rage palpable. All except Eddie, who, covered in blood, moved to slip by him. "Please don't leave. It'll just take a sec," Miller read from his iPhone. "Number 1, it is not safe to put slogans on the walls and not with Scotch tape." He pointed the phone toward the bloody alcove behind him. "To be in compliance, that slogan has to come down." The team turned around to look. It was one of the famous laws of the House of God. See, I can rely on the laws. I love laws of House of God. At a cardiac arrest, the first thing to do is to take your own pulse. They turned back to Kenneth S. Miller Jr. Silence. It seemed palpably possible that someone on the team was going to commit an additional safety violation by strangling Kenneth with his or her pair of hands. The odds were on Eddie. Leatrice Shumsky jumped in, trying hard to save Kenneth's psyche or even life. "Are you saying, dear, that the slogan is unsafe or the Scotch tape?" "Yes, both are unsafe. A first warning is like a warning. But what's the second dangerous safety violation?" Amy asked pleasantly. "At the nurses' station, the nurses are like drinking beverages from bottles and leaving them open in the air. Open pop bottles or other bottles are like unsafe. Someone told me this. Slowly, Eddie pushed his way past Amy. If you were on Eddie's team, he'd die for them, like he did for his buddies in the rice paddies of his war. If on the opposing team, look out. Pointing to his badge, he said, wait a second, what am I doing? Where is? I've got a typo here. Oh, let me just see. It's good if you don't have typos on the last chance. 1 second, 20. 21. Hospital hunks and sterile. 22. Okay. Pointing to his badge, he said, no, I already read that, didn't I? 1 second. Okay, I got it. If on the opposing team, look out. Okay, yeah. If on the opposing team, right, Eddie would stand up for you in the paddies of the war. If on the opposing team, look out. His balding head shined red-gray in the bright lights. His beard shined scarlet. His protective gear was covered in blood, wet and glistening. Eddie walked slowly to Kenneth S. Miller, who had to back up more and couldn't get out of the way, but eventually found himself against a wall in a corner between a pile of bedpans and a wheelchair containing a senior citizen name tag Roz Cohn, gesturing and crying, "Go away, go away, go away." Slowly, Eddie raised his bloody gloves toward Kenneth's throat. Kenneth's eyes got wide. He clutched his iPhone in front of his face, waving it back in a hex for a monster to skip a hex to hex a monster. They stood there silently for what seemed a long time. Willowy young Miller Jr. started to shake, scared to death. Eddie smiled. "Did I touch you?" Silence. "Answer!" Eddie barked. "No." "And you feel nice and safe right now? Cush care safe?" Miller hesitated. A tough question. Eat my dust leaned down over him and put his tan, chiseled and lined with pain face about an inch from Miller's plump baby one. Slowly enunciating each word, he said, "I did not hear you answer." To repeat, "You feel nice and safe right now?" Yeah. Yes, right now, yes. "Good. Be careful down here, Mr. He checked his badge, Kenneth S. Miller Jr. It's emergency here, 24/7, full of crazy people who are very, very, very hungry." So, a little bit of a problem. What about that?
Well, we probably have time for maybe one more comment or question. And then I want to leave a little bit of time if you want to come up and meet Dr. Shem before you leave. I know a lot of you have 12.
I'd like to actually, because this has been so slow, I'd like to read one more thing if we're choosing between things.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I-
just
and
a
I
couple
think
minutes. Yeah, we have about 2 minutes. Yeah.
2 minutes. All right. Let me see. Let's give you a little hint of what happened. This is at the end. Roy and Barry, you remember Roy and Barry? They bought this house. And their daughter has just left after the whole thing is over. Their daughter, she and her boyfriend just left, so they're kind of sad because they announced they're getting married. And so Barry goes into the house and Roy is left alone. And this is what happens. give you a little. Let's see. Okay, Roy, she goes into the house. He's saying, the love of our lives in love and happy, and I'm glad for her, happy that he's a great kid. Well, but it's sad. This is internal for him, and hell. And I've been wondering what I'm going to do with my life now that the third wave COVID is dying off. That's when it's ended. Sad. He says he's thinking sad. It is sad, said a familiar voice, trembling with grief. Startled, Roy looked around. Nothing. The hardest thing for a dad or mom, the voice said, is to see the next generation come along and grab your kid, especially for a dad. Your girl? An ache in the heart that, Roy G. Bash, you might not be able to bear. Fats? He cried. Roy? Fats. And there he was, bobbing up and down slowly, just above a low limb of their 20-foot tall dogwood, now naked of its white rose blossoms, eye to eye with him. He was wearing the Fat Man. The Fat Man's in this. Anybody read What Happens to the Fat Man after Man's Fourth Best Hospital? Okay. I'll save it for you. He dies at the end of that. Okay. But in the book, Roy sees him coming out, and he's there, and they have talks. He was wearing a voluminous Renaissance gown and a floopy violet hat that looked like a fat pizza collapsed on his head, with a wilting red rose standing straight up like one of those wavy old antennas, maybe a connection to the internet. Why the hell are you dressed up like the Borgias? Roy says. Oops, wrong century, says Fats. He settled on a low bare branch, and in a trice he was in his usual doctor garb. Fat shoes, fat trousers straining to contain the plump thighs, long white doctor's coat skimming the branch, and shiny stethoscope cavalierly encircling that size 19 neck. Man, seeing her leave here with her beloved is, Fats broke up weeping, a monogrammed FM, Batman, hanky appearing in the air, and he grabs it and he made for that Jewish nose that started out high up, striving, rising out until, as if recalling its tormented ancestors, made a sharp dive down toward his lips. Two walloping nose blasts. Roy started crying too. They blew their noses. Fats's trombone, Roy's trumpet. Yes, Fats said, a heartache to have her go, a little death, but a benediction too. It brings back when Cinnamon died, Roy said. I'm still not over him. There's nothing like a dog, Fats said. Dogs affirm God. When Chubby died, oh, he said. Speaking of death, do you forgive me, really? Roy asked. You can read it at the end of the book. Do you forgive me, really? Roy asked. What? He fell off the limb, but floated. Forget what? In Man's Fourth, Chuck and me letting you take the elevator up to become president of the hospital. Are you bananas? If I couldn't stop myself, you think you could have? Nothing could have. I would have died in 6 months, max. My heart would have attacked me, gone. Promise? Roy says. Cross my heart and hope to die. He paused. Cross my heart and hope to die. He paused, but I already did. That's the great thing up here. No worry about dying. No PSAs, no colonoscopies. And above all, no need to diet or work out. Perfecto. The root of pain is time. Think about that. The root of pain is time. Thanks. So now, Bash, what are you going to do next? What are you going to write more? You're going to write more? Roy was startled. Barry had always said that as much as he and others, and even she, loved Fats, he almost never asked anybody anything. He just told people, mostly by talking, and his laws and his laughs. She said, he doesn't get to mutual. Think about that. Thanks for asking, Roy asked him. Yeah, I learned to do more of that asking up here. He said, as if he could read Roy's mind. Tell Barry that I'm learning in a post-mortem men's group. Quote, how to get to mutual. It's a real small group. Really hard, makes you a caring man. He beamed, really beamed. So write another write another novel. This one's the last. Nah, keep writing about putting the human in healthcare and squeezing the money out. His face turned pensive and serious. Of course, things have changed since the House of God in what, 1973? Roy nodded. Yes, Nixon, shit, 50 years, and then Mount Misery and man's fourth best hospital. Yeah, yeah, said Roy. And now with this one, this new one, he paused, astonished. 1973 to 2023, 50 years. A quartet, said Fats. They laughed. Okay, you got me online big time. Start a podcast. Also do high-paying personal appearances before live audiences. If the COVID ever ends, and oops, gotta hop. Why? Wait, I can't do anything. I'm expansive without you. You think I'm going somewhere else? I'll always be here. It's not like the living. They can't make that always claim, right? He shook his head. Cheaters, a whole human life making promises that they can't keep. You got a point there, Fats. Much more sensible what I got now. But I don't have any control over when I see you. You pop up at random and random. You think after all this that there's a random? Sheesh. And what about in our dreams? Uh-oh, Barry will be here in 12 seconds. Gotta hop. Why don't you want to see her? Not now, it would jangle the flow. Bye, till we meet again. I love you. In another trice, he was wearing an old-time pilot outfit with a lavender scarf and leather goggles and pretended to turn on the invisible motor and the imagined plane itself. Waving gaily, he said, ciao, Roy G. Bash, MD. Ciao, ciao, and think Tulsa. Tulsa? Right. What do you mean Tulsa? But he was gone and Barry was walking out with the coffee. How was he? Barry asked. You saw him? No, but unless you've gone crazy, you're not talking to anyone else who isn't alive, if they were. Anyway, so no colonoscopies.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Shem, for this wonderful reading of Our Hospital coming out in a few months. Thank you for everyone online. And we'll see everyone again soon. If you'd like to meet Shem, I don't know if we have any more free books signed by Shem, but there might be one or two left. If you'd like a book, you can take one. If you want to come up to meet Shem now, if you brought a copy for him to sign, I'm sure he would be happy to do that as well.
Sure.